As always. So, should it be illegal for politicians to lie, particularly in their election manifestos? Well, joining us now to discuss that are Peter Hitchens, a columnist for the Mail on Sunday. Ian Leslie is an author, and Gina Miller is a businesswoman and campaigner. Welcome to you all. Gina Miller, you heard Lord Sugar there. Do you think it should be a criminal offence for politicians to lie?
I think there are degrees of lies and therefore there should be degrees of punishments, but I think there should be punishments for politicians who lie. I see it a bit like a code of ethics or being a doctor. If a politician lies and breaks that code of ethics, then they should be struck off and not be allowed to be a politician again. And if it's a more serious lie, then they should be, and if there is a consequence to the country, then I think there should be ramifications.
Govan Johnson, I mean, with the referendum, of course, it's irreversible. With general elections, you just vote them out the next election. Should Govan Johnson be in prison?
Well, I think Mr Gove in particular actually said to me it was fine to lie on the electoral trail, so I absolutely think he should be answerable for that, because the consequences of the lies are so enormous to the country that they should be responsible. And the fact is that exploiting fear by lying has become more visible, and there's far more of it in politics, and that's really worrying to all of us. So we're going to have to bring something in that stops that flow and that building up of lies that's happening.
Peter, you're not known for your love of politicians. Would you bang them up if they lie?
Apart from the practical unworkability of it, selective victor's justice which would follow, and the losing opposition being prosecuted by the government while people still remember what had been said, all kinds of other impracticabilities such as that, it's ridiculous for us to pretend that the politicians are the only ones involved in dishonesty at elections. In the old Soviet Union, it used to be said that people pretended to work and the government pretended to pay them. The work was phony, the money was phony. In our elections, the politicians pretend to have lots of money to spend on us. We pretend to believe them. And it's by pretending to believe them repeatedly that we've got into the mess that we have. We are just as complicit in it as they are. We're far too willing to believe the blatant lies that we're being told by people who are bribing us with our own money. And one of the reasons why democracy is going so rapidly down the plumbing is precisely because of that. So to turn on the politicians and blame them for playing this game, which we play with absolutely the same enthusiasm, is ridiculous.
We can't blame the public if they're
yes,
all lying.
If
they're all lying, who is there to vote for?
It's time we blame the public, because the public self-deception is one of the reasons why this country is so heavily in debt, both nationally and individually. We will not face up to the realities of the situation. We would much rather be lied to than told the truth. If any politician went into an election and said, this is the real state of the economy, we're bankrupt, we don't make or export anything worth having, and we're going to have to increase income tax or other kinds of taxes very heavily simply to balance the national books, they'd lose the election.
Let's bring in Emma, who has a guest with years of political experience.
Yes, I do. Let me welcome now the former Tory MP and Cabinet Minister Edwina Currie. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me correct you in something you've just said. I wouldn't wish it to be known as a lie that I've said I'm a Cabinet Minister. Margaret Thatcher did not have any women Cabinet Ministers. I was a Government Minister.
Government Minister. OK, we are being honest from the start. Let's see if I can hold you to that. Should politicians ever be prosecuted for lying to the public?
Well, they are under electoral law. It's an electoral offence. Phil Wallace, for example, who was a Labour government minister in 2010, fought an election with lies on his leaflets. Unfortunately, his opponent was a millionaire businessman, not Alan Sugar, but someone else, who took him to electoral court. The election was set to one side, and Wallace was banned for 3 years from taking part in any election campaigns.
OK, so
but
do you think
it can be done?
Do you think those rules need updating in light of, let's say, something like the EU referendum, where there was, as some people have put it, a big lie on the side of a bus about how much money would come back into the NHS should we leave the European Union? Specifically, would you put the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson in prison or have him prosecuted?
Well, I think part of the problem in a fast-moving campaign is just the speed of doing this. You know, the lie is around the world before the truth has put its boots on, and the rather cumbersome process, as I think Peter Hitchens has just pointed out, where you'd have to have it checked and have lawyers and all the rest of it. By that time, you've actually got the election done, or the voting has been done, and people have taken a decision. And of course, the best lies are the ones where there is an element of truth. I mean, I was a Remain campaigner, but it is true that we make a substantial net contribution to the EU, and at some point in the future, when we're out of it, we won't be making that, and that money might be available for other things.
So you don't sound like you want to put Boris Johnson in the can just yet. What about Jeremy Corbyn and his promise promises with regards to student debt?
Well, as I recall, Alan Sugar misquoted him a bit. What Corbyn said was student debt, I will deal with it. I will deal with it. You can read into that whatever you like, but if you're talking to a bunch of students and to young people, they are likely to think, you know what, that's going to mean no student debt. It's going to mean no fees in future. That would be absolutely great. We will vote for that. So 1 million of them did, and some of them even voted twice, which is, of course, another electoral offence.
Well, let's stick with this for a moment. Edwina Currie, can you honestly say now you never lied while you were in politics?
Let me tell you the truth. Of course, I occasionally lied, but sometimes it was because the truth was so unpalatable that people found that very, very hard. And sometimes you had to say to people, look, you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, and particularly with constituents, but I won't lie to you. And they would then try and find somebody else with a second opinion because that's what they preferred. Peter Hitchens has referred to that as well. He's quite right.
What's an example of what you lied about? Anything major that you actually regret? For example, I represented a coal mining constituency, and it was more than obvious that the pits were going to close. They had been worked for many, many years. They were worked out. They were dangerous. They were being heavily subsidised to keep people there. We were going to have to find something else for people to do. That was not at the time of the miners' strike, when these men were at work, a palatable thing to stand up and make speeches about. But in the aftermath of the miners' strike, when people realised that change had to come, that was the approach that I took. And indeed, we got Toyota, so we were successful. Edwina Currie, thank you for that. Sean, when it's not palatable, you don't say the truth necessarily at the time.
Sometimes the truth is actually more harmful. Ian Leslie, with good time to bring in our lying expert. You've written a book about lying. Did you lie about the book?
I
did
lie
write
about
it, didn't
everything. So let's just say that right off the bat.
Are politicians worse than the general public?
I don't think so, no. I think politicians, if anything, probably lie less than members of the general public, because whatever they say is exposed to such unforgiving scrutiny that they have to be very, very careful about what they say. In actual fact, I think the reason we start to think of them as a little bit shifty and a little bit dishonest is that they're always guarding themselves against any kind of possible accusation that they could be lying. And the fact is, you know, people lie all the time. We all lie all the time. And that was the big theme from when I talked to all the psychologists who study this for a living for my book. They have various different theories of how lying works and why people lie. But what they all agree on is that people lie habitually and you know, it's part of daily life. So one psychologist came up with, found this figure, which is that people lie 3 times within 10 minutes of meeting each other. Right? So, I mean, we've only met a few minutes ago, and I've probably already kind of told a few porkies. So another one found that people lie on average about twice a day, which I think is probably concerning.
There are lies and lies, aren't there? The lies which really make people angry are the lies told to damage other innocent persons, bearing a false witness, or lies to gain advantage over other people unfairly. Those are the lies that matter, and those lies, of course, are told in politics, and I think in business as well.
So, Ian, there are different degrees of lying. Are business people worse than politicians? You've just painted quite a good picture of politicians.
I think they are just as bad as politicians, if not worse. I work in business as well, and the idea that business is more honest than politics, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. Business people exaggerate and prevaricate all the time, and so do we all.
It is not confined to just politics. I think we've got people in all walks of life who've risen to the top, who then have sticks and carrots as to why they're lying. Some it's for advancement, and then it's normally the stick is you're going to be sacked or you won't be promoted. So it happens all the time. But we should expect, or I expect our politicians to be better. I don't want them to be lying. What I think is very worrying is, as I said, is the increase in lying and how visible it is now, and playing on people's fears. When you are lying in politics, I think, and you're exasperating people's fears, then that's not a responsible thing to do, and we have to have some checks and balances when it comes to lying that creates fear.
Yeah, but politicians have been lying for years.
Yes, they have, I know. And as Churchill very famously said, when he was asked about lying, he said, "I've lied many times for my country, but less frequently to my country," and that is the difference.
Does it seem worse now because the public and the media are a lot more connected through social media, so we can share our views. He's lying, and then you put it out on social media and everybody else sees it. Whereas before we couldn't do that.
But the public are partly to blame on this, because I have to say that I think that, you know, if you look at the end of 2016, the statistic was only 15% of the population trust politicians. But how vocal are they at actually saying to politicians, well, I don't trust you? They are quite willing to take the lie because perhaps it's lazier, it's easier, so they are complicit.
5 years of moaning that politicians always lie, and then 30 seconds in the polling booth voting for the same people. But can I just set something against this, the idea that this is new? I mean, for instance, we've had an awful lot of stuff about the referendum campaign, and as a supporter of this country leaving the European Union, I completely accept that the Leave campaign behaved disgracefully in some of the things they said, but so did the Remain campaign. And what's more, the whole thing began with Ted Heath telling an enormous whopper about how joining the then common market wouldn't affect British sovereignty and independence. It's complete and absolute falsehood. And it's on the basis of that falsehood that the whole row has rested ever since. So the idea that it's one-sided or new seems to me to need to be corrected.
I don't think it's one-sided. I think both sides lied.
Yeah.
Good.
But then you have to decide, you know, who's going to decide who's lying and who's not, right? Right? Who's going to decide whether or not that promise about the NHS is a lie, right? You think that's going to be decided in the courts? Yeah. The people who voted, you know, on that basis don't necessarily think that. You have that view, you know. So the way we punish politicians for lying is by voting them out of office. Once we've decided
the argument
they're
is
dishonest,
we can't do that with a referendum. Let's get social media's view.
Well, who decides who lies? We hopefully do fact-checking for you here at the BBC as journalists. I just want to clarify something Edwina Curry said. With regards to Phil Woolis, the CPS didn't go ahead with that prosecution, and we'll bring you that fact. Tell, though, on Twitter has got in touch. Manifestos can't be made legally binding as situations might change. Robert chimes in, lying occasionally is a requirement of politics. We also have to be realistic that no one will ever meet every single manifesto pledge that they promise. But Bob says politicians get away with all sorts of behaviour that would see the rest of us in court. If a company sold its products with such blatant lies, they would be prosecuted. But Michelle says, not sent to prison for our politicians, but they should lose their jobs. If we lied in our jobs, we would be sacked. And Paul, chiming in with a practical note, prosecute politicians for lying? We'd have to build a new prison after every election. Thanks for that, Paul. We like the practicality.
That's an interesting thought. Peter, how can we make politicians more honest? You've already blamed the public, but how can we change that?
I think a more educated and electorate is what you really need. The real crisis of our country is in the collapse of education since the destruction of the grammar schools in the 1960s, since when people have been taught what to think but not how to think. And if you can't think, then how can you possibly judge whether somebody should be elected to government or not?
You ever lied in your job? Big lie?
I don't think. I mean, you really are caught out in my job if you lie in print. I've lied personally, beyond doubt.
Your body language wasn't good there. Looked like you maybe hiding something.
You can doubtless find it if I have, is all I can say. And if you have, I'll admit to it.
Yes or no? Lied in your job?
Caught.
I think we all tell to some degree, but I know from my investment world that when you tell the truth, there's a price to pay. And I think that's the thing. You get less votes, you get less customers, but I think it's still the right thing to do.
And you've lied. You've already admitted to that.
Exactly. So I think you're right. It's about the conditions that the politicians operate in. It's not that they're particularly bad at lying.
Well, we are out of time, and that is not a lie, so thank you all very much indeed.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.